Welcome back to my top 100. This time we'll be looking at games 11 to 20, and these games are really excellent. They all get virtually my highest recommendation. The fact that they're not in my actual top 10 means that they're just a little bit behind those other games. But these are so good. Um, these are clearly among my favorite games and some of the best games ever designed, in my opinion. And of course, my opinion is the only one that matters, so you can disregard any other top 100 video list that you've ever seen because this is the definitive list of what belongs in the top 20 slots, starting with 11 through 20. So let's get started. My number 20 is Golem. Golem is a new addition to this list. In fact, I think it's the second highest game to be new to my list in terms of where it ranks overall. Its weight is about an 8 and it plays 1 to 4 players. This is just a really intriguing puzzle to my mind. It is a game that combines familiar feeling mechanisms with something that I haven't quite seen before, which is like tracks where you can have things go out of control if you aren't keeping pace with the golems as they move along the tracks. And golems are more powerful, but they can end up causing you more issues than you anticipate if you don't also have your students keep pace with them. And so you're forced to try to keep them under control as much as you can. If you can't, it's unfortunate. And you're getting to some penalties, so there's this sort of push and pull aspect between exactly how much you think you can get done. It's a resource management game with an interesting marble selection mechanism. It's just, I think I was listening to one podcast where the complaint was that it wasn't quite enough in the category of something entirely different, entirely new. But that's exactly what I appreciate about this game. This is a combination of a very traditional Euro game with some very different mechanisms that haven't been used before. And that's ultimately what I want when I'm playing a new Euro game. If you can't make a better game than classic Kalis, then make a game that has a lot of those elements but has some kind of twist on it. So you have that worker placement element here. But you've also got a marble drafting mechanism that feels fairly new and a randomization aspect, and then there's also a matter of how the colors you draft are going to affect you. It's all terribly clever, and honestly, it's just a game I want to play more and more. The only drawback so far is the solo mode, which I would have liked to have tried by now. It seems a little burdensome in terms of the amount of stuff that you actually have to do to get it up and running. Other than that, I love it. I think it's an incredibly interesting game. Now, this could fall for me, maybe as the novelty wears off, or it could just stay around here forever. I could honestly see both of those things happening. So, for now, it's 20. Might hit my top 10, might fall off my top 100 completely in a few years. Just a really solid Euro game. And if you're looking for something that just does something a little bit different, a little bit outside the box in terms of what Euro games are doing, but still marries it with those more traditional mechanisms, this is a fantastic one for that. And kind of a cool theme, if only lightly explored, using Jewish folklore as sort of a basis for the setting. So, my number 20, Golem. Golem? Golem. Golem. It's Golem, I think. My number 19 is the game that is the highest ranked game that is new to my list, and that is Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium is a game that just has so much tension in it. It is, I think, the experience that a lot of people had when they were first starting to play these more hobbyist style games, and they played Catan, and they had a really interesting race to 10 points. The structure of going for about 10 points is here as well. It's just that the means of getting there are, for me, a lot more interesting. It's a combination of something that I like being the focal point of the game with a mechanism that I like being more tertiary in terms of its role in the game. That is, it's a worker placement game combined with deck building. And I find that marriage of like pulled back focus on the worker placement but still being a central mechanism with pulled back focus on the deck building and sort of splitting the game between those two really compelling in this case and in the case of Lost Ruins of Arnak, which is another game that came out in the same year as this one, but I think this is the better of the two games. I've also played it only once with the expansion, but I really want to play it more. I did think it spiced up the game significantly, and although I kind of avoided in my game with the expansion using the expansion stuff too much, and I ultimately won by ignoring it, which is a good sign because it means that that element doesn't just take over the game completely. You can still play it in a similar way. I think that's good in expansion. I don't necessarily want the expansion to define the new way that you have to play it. I just want it to give me another option. And that does seem to be what it was. But those options, even though I wasn't taking them, in considering them, they were quite compelling. The theme works for me. I did enjoy the movie quite a bit, and I probably do want to check out the books at some point. I just may do it after I finish seeing the other movie or movies that they shoot to tell the rest of the story of Dune on film, since I'm already invested in that particular series. But it's... I don't think you need to be a fan of Dune to appreciate this game, to appreciate... It's got relatively solid artwork. The components can be a little basic, but honestly, it also means that the price is a little bit more reasonable. Unless you want to get the Super Deluxe upgrades, which are available and costly, but they do make the game look significantly better. So you do have the option, which is nice. And honestly, I would say just play this game in some form. I may even go for some of the upgraded components at some point, because I think this game is going to kick around in my top 100 for quite some time and get a fair number of plays. Everyone I've played this with so far has seemed to be a big fan of it and just really enjoyed the play experience. And oh my, just the amount of tension that is involved as you race towards those 10 points is really palpable in this game. And sometimes that's exactly what I'm looking for in a board game. So that is my number 19. New to my list, weight is about a 6. It's a medium weight game, maybe slightly heavier than that. And we'll play 1 to 4 players. The solo is not too bad. That is Dune Imperium. My number 18, and I did miss putting this someplace cute by 1 rank, is Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders, you can tell by the fact that this is a little bit more of a worn box, and the fact that the cover art isn't totally up to date. This is the older edition. It also has a couple of expansions in it, the Leaders expansion and the Cities expansion. This was previously ranked 18. Its weight is about a 5 out of 10. Maybe you could convince me some days that it's as low as maybe a 4. And will comfortably play between 3 to 7 players. This particular version technically includes a 2-player mode, but I've never tried it because it sounds kind of dumb. Although, to be fair, Rado completely swears by it and says that it is the best way to play this game. But what does he know? He just has a much larger YouTube channel and has been playing thousands of board games for years and years and years. Alright, so as to what I think, Seven Wonders is kind of a go-to next step game, a game that I play with people if I feel they can handle a little bit more complexity, and I've taken them through something simpler, something like Century Spice Road, or maybe Camel Up, or Macropolis, or Number 9. If I've taken them through that, or a party game, and I think that they're picking up the rules well and they could handle something with a little bit more meat to it, this is often a good game to go with, because even if they get sort of stuck and play slowly, the game is still not going to drag out much longer than an hour at most. Which is good because, for whatever reason, it just seems like I have a lot of slow players around me that I play with, even the people who I play games with regularly. Yeah. So, given that, it's good to have a game that has a definite endpoint that is hard to miss. And Seven Wonders does provide that. It's also just a clean system that just works well and gives you a lot to think about in terms of how you want to manage the game. It does something that I'm usually not overly a fan of, which is that the game is balanced in such a way that you're going to get about a certain number of points, no matter what. So you might as well then just play in such a way that you're just trying to like optimize it very slightly. And so there isn't a way to really be so massively better at this game that you're going to like double up the score of another player who's played even a couple of times. That overly balanced design philosophy doesn't sit that well with me. I prefer a game to have a high skill ceiling and to try to tangibly reward you with, oh, I just scored a lot of points more than I'm used to because I just figured out how to really exploit the system well. That's sort of what I'm going for in games, and I want that sense of as you progress, you just get a little bit of a pat on the back from the game telling you that you're getting better. But for whatever reason, it doesn't really bother me here, maybe because I'm often playing this with newer players anyway. It is certainly possible to avoid getting very many points by just not understanding how to go for points in any of the multiple ways that you can go for points that are available in this game. Going, well, I won't get a bunch of science cards and I won't get a bunch of points cards. I'm just going to get a bunch of resources and then accumulate a bunch of money, and that's about it. Yeah, so you can get skunked a little bit if you do that. But otherwise, it's a civilization theme. It plays swiftly. There's a decent amount of thinking that goes into the game. There's a decent amount of variability thanks to the fact that it's essentially a card game. The expansions, I think, are very good. I think Leaders addresses my issue with there not being a particularly high skill ceiling because it lets you push the game system a little bit further than it was originally intended to go. And so you can get more science symbols than you might have initially been able to, and you can have a little bit more money to play with at the beginning, which gives you a little bit more flexibility. So I think, especially this game with expansions, is just a really entertaining experience that is just going to be among my favorite games for a long time yet. I think this used to be one of my brother's favorite games. If not his favorite game for a while, till he got into Dominion. But he's still a huge fan, and so am I. This is a wonderful game. I'll play it pretty much anytime, as long as I have at least 3 players. And honestly, I think I prefer it with the slightly lower player counts because you can kind of choose a card with the intention of a card that you specifically let go. You are hoping that it will come back to you, that it won't get drafted by the other players, and you can do that at 3 or 4 players, whereas you really can't at 6 or 7. 4 or 5 is you can do it in the first round essentially, and that's about it. First and second, I guess, in 4 players. Yeah, so that is my number 18, 7 Wonders. There's a much shinier box out there that you can go play now, so enjoy that one. My number 17 is Abyss, and you can see this title on the side because the cover is just all art. I think the Dice Tower is about to do a best board game cover. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the variants of the Abyss covers, because there are different ones. It's not just this one. I have one particular cover. There's another one that's much more common, and I think there are several others as well. I wouldn't be surprised if that cover does quite well. Abyss is a card game at its heart. It has a little bit of push your luck. It has a little bit of resource management in terms of you have a currency and pearls that once it gets used drives up the price to do the same thing again. There's also the cards that you're trying to collect that will let you unlock certain characters, which will give you points and push you towards the end of the game, because ultimately the game will end if someone takes 7 of these Lord cards that you're purchasing throughout the game. There's also a fact that there are these blind piles that accumulate with cards that are not taken over the course of the game, and they stack up, and you have to decide if it's worth it at some point to take one of those stacks, knowing that maybe a lot of the cards, because they're the cards that weren't taken, are going to be low value ones that aren't going to be super helpful, but maybe if you take a bunch of them, it's going to be helpful because you can just add them all up together for something. But then you have to worry about the fact that if you're playing a bunch of low value cards, the card that you are going to keep face up in front of you out of that when you spend it on a Lord card is going to have to be the lowest value or tied for the lowest value of any of the cards you used. So that's a tricky element that you have to decide, and then occasionally there's fighting the monster, which with the expansion actually gets a lot more interesting, but even in the base game there's an element of, okay, if I pass on this now, maybe I don't have to take this reward that I don't particularly want, but if I do pass on it, the problem is that it's going to turn into a better reward for the next person who flips up this type of card. So for a game that doesn't have a ton of rules, it is a medium weight game. It was previously ranked on my last list at 14, so it's right around the same area again. Its weight is 5 and plays 2 to 4 players. For not a ton of rules, there's a lot of tricky decisions that are involved. And I never feel like I fully understand how to maximize my chances of winning. There is an element of luck that is definitely a factor here, but it also just doesn't feel like it feels like the optimal way of playing the game continues to elude me, which I think is a sign of a well-designed fuzziness in the play experience, which I think you often want to attain, especially if you're playing something, especially if you're designing something a little bit more medium to heavier weight. But it is also just, it feels like I am still learning how to play this game, and that's something that I look for. Add this to the fact that the artwork is quite beautiful, that it is maybe not heavily thematic, but it is at least evocative, and sometimes that's enough, especially for a game that is going to take about 45 minutes, and maybe not much longer than that. I think it's a terrific game. I would happily play this with just about anyone. Although, while I say it's a 2 to 4 player game, I would much prefer this at 3 and 4 players than 2. I've played a decent number of 2-player games because this is one of the games that will generally go over well with my wife. But even that aside, I would still rather play at 3 or 4 players if I'm in a perfect abyssful universe. So yeah, it's a terrific game. Give it a try. I think this is a game that is criminally overlooked and sort of seen as another good game. But no, this should be on a lot more favorite games lists. This should be in a lot more top 100s and top 50s by various board game influencers. I don't know why it isn't, to be honest. I think it just never quite had the big cultural impact of something like even Seven Wonders, which I think everyone either plays and loves or has at least played because there are so many other people that play and love it that they've at least given it a try. I don't think this is quite at that same level, and I think it deserves to be because I think this is everybody's good, and I would say even a little bit better than what is a confirmed classic in Seven Wonders. Terrific game. Please give it a try if you haven't already. It's a very good use of a 45-minute and maybe a 10-minute teach, as long as you can find someone who knows how to play it already. So, that is my number 17, Abyss. Okay, trying this a second time. My number 16 is Zolkin, the Mayan Calendar. Zolkin was previously ranked at 13. Its weight is about an 8 out of 10. And will play 2 to 4 players pretty comfortably at all those player counts. Zolkin is a game that's been in my top 10 before. It's been a game that I've really liked. Honestly, it could get back into my top 10 if I could only get it played on a more regular basis. It is a game about gears and a central gear that moves all the other gears, and so that every time a turn comes around, the workers that you place onto these gears advance a little further, and the longer you wait, the more lucrative the reward is when you take them off. This combined with the fact that it's got several tracks, which immediately gets my interest and attention. Tracks that give you better things for certain actions, tracks that give you more currency, tracks that will let you do all sorts of fun things, and all you have to do to get them going is to take certain actions, but then you have to worry about paying for things and feeding your workers, and you've only got so much time before you can do any of these things. And there's also midterm scoring and endgame scoring, and then there are going up these tracks for points, but you also get some bonuses for scooping up them. Oh, there's just so much good stuff in here. My number one game, which I won't name here, is a game that I have vague aspirations to become a competitive player at. That I would really love to be able to play at a high level and compete with the best players from all around the world. That's not true of a large number of my games. I'm pretty happy playing a lot of them casually. But if I had to pick a second game that I would really be interested in being able to play at that high level, it would actually probably be this one. And I'm not quite sure why I want to play this one at a super high competitive level, despite the fact that right now I'm actually quite bad at it. Like, I've never really been that good at it, even at the level of being a casual player. But there's something about this game that just seems oceans deep to me in terms of how to play it well. So I really just need to get this played again sometime soon, because it's been far too long since I played this. It was at least since the beginning of the pandemic that I haven't played it. And it's probably been a year or two longer than that. It's amazing. I love this game so much. It is so good. I just wish I was better at it, and I wish I had people to play it with on a regular basis. You should definitely give it a try. It is one of the stalwarts from 2012, one of the games that came out that year that people just continue to play for excellent reason. This is amazing. The whole T series was launched by this game. And really, nothing has happened that has made this one age poorly in that entire time. That is my number 16, Zolkin. My number 15 is a bit of a cheat, and I don't have it here, because this one is the Unlock series, and I'm putting them all together because I would feel sort of strange about ranking just an individual unlock, since you can really only play each of them once a piece. Anywhere. It's like, how good was my one play of Unlock, the Western one on the train, versus how much did I enjoy that versus all my plays put together of Zolkin, for instance. So what I'm doing here is I'm instead mushing them all together and sort of putting how strongly I rate them collectively. So I'm dropping maybe a few of the less compelling plays from consideration, but I think that's also true of games that I really enjoy. If I played them a number of times, some of those plays were just clearly less compelling than others. So it's more of a comparison of it's how good is it at its best, and how often does it get to be at its best, or at least close. And the answer on both of those fronts is it's excellent, and it's high up there often. And so that's enough to put it as my 15th favorite game. So if I was to play any game, not considering mood or anything, there are only 14 other games that I would be more excited about playing than a new unlock that was given to me, if it was about on par with what I would expect from the Unlock series. These are escape room in a game, escape room and box games, and I've played almost all of them 2 players with my wife. She enjoys them very much, so do I, and it's, I think, easier for us to play games together that are cooperative in the first place. But the hook of the splashy colors and the lights, but their storyline is really compelling here. And I just like puzzles. A lot of my favorite games are feel like sophisticated puzzles, and this particular series is more literal puzzles. It's less of a metaphor and more exactly what it happens to be. They're a tremendous amount of fun, and they rank much higher than the Exit series, which I believe I had on this list. I'm just scrolling through it right now. I think I had Exit as a series somewhere on here. Yes, I did. That 81. Um, but I just like these a lot better. They're a lot more consistent. Because the difference is the Exit series just doesn't quite have towards the top of the quality level as often as Unlock does, and so that makes up for a significant gap in terms of where they sit in my top 100. They both belong in there, but Unlock belongs very high, whereas Exit just belongs somewhere in the top 100. I would say if you haven't played any escape room in a box games, Unlock is by far the best place to start. I've dabbled in other series, but I haven't hit anything that is as consistently compelling as Unlock and as consistently accessible as Unlock. So that is my number 15, the Unlock series. I currently don't have any of them sitting around the house, or I would have at least shown one of those 3-pack boxes that I've had come through the house. Great series. Looking forward to the game-themed one whenever that 3-pack becomes available. Number 15, Unlock. Oh, previously ranked 16. Its weight is about a 2, and realistically will play between 1 and 4 players. My number 14 is Agricola. Agricola is previously ranked 17, so it's actually gone up slightly, which is, when it's up this high on the list and it's going up, that's pretty impressive. Its weight is about an 8, and it will play 1 to 4 players. Agricola is the game that is remembered as one of the games that really kicked off the worker placement craze. It was designed by Uwe Rosenberg, who was best known prior to this for his game Bonanza, and this is an incredibly different game than Bonanza, although I did see a Bonanza reference on one of the cards that I played when I played this last. Agricola is a worker placement game that is very punishing, but does give you more freedom of choice than would initially appear. You do have a fair range of things you can do, but it's not always apparent how to make it work in such a way that you're not going to have people starve. This is true in the competitive game, and this is true in the solo game. In the competitive game, when you're playing against at least one other human opponent, the problem is, as in most worker placement games, someone can take your spot right before you were going to take it. So the person who just took that 7 food spot, and now you are short food, and how the heck are you going to come up with that? It's clever because everything that you're trying to accomplish needs to have things go in multiple steps, and you can't usually get all of those steps accomplished at once. So you have to decide, well, I need something that will convert resources into food. So you can take the major upgrades to be able to basically cook food. And so that could be animals, or um, that could be wheat, but wheat only through the baked bread option, which becomes available, but you still have to go someplace that says baked bread. Um, it's just incredibly tricky. There's a lot going on, and if you don't play it right, the game will punish you. And if you're not prepared for that, that can take you aback here, because this is a difficult a difficult life to run successfully in Agricola. it just, everything that you're trying to do is going to require you to really plan ahead, and it never feels like you have enough options. And as soon as you take the action that gives you more options by getting another worker that you can then use to do more things in a single round, as soon as that happens, then you have to deal with the fact that you have to have more food for you have to have more food for that person, which means that your list of problems just grew. It's an amazing game, and I don't think anything has quite come close to making that punishing but rewarding feel of slowly crawling up a hill through the snow and gradually making your way to the summit, and then being able to finally walk downhill on the other side as you finally gain some momentum right towards the end of the game. I don't know if there's another game that quite captures that feeling as well as Agricola, so it's still among my favorites. Now, I gotta give a big caveat. I haven't played Caverna. I don't think, based on the description I've heard of Caverna, that I would like it as much as Agricola, although I would bet pretty strongly that I would like it quite a bit. Because I like the tension, and I like the tightness, and I like the fact that everything is pulling you back, but you can gradually and eventually break free of that if you play intelligently. That's exactly what I like about Agricola, and just making it a little bit freer and easier and gentler on the player. Sounds like a step back to me. It might not be enough of a step back that I wouldn't want to play it sometimes and might enjoy it. It might eventually end up in my collection as well. But it doesn't scream to me, this is exactly what I want Agricola to be instead. I want Agricola to be Agricola. I don't want Agricola to be Caverna. Maybe playing the game itself will change my mind, but I haven't got there yet. So for now, it is Agricola that is incredibly high on my list at 14. I think it's crept as high as 10 at one point, and I wouldn't be surprised if it managed to get back into the top 10 at some point, because I really just love it that much. Number 14, Agricola. Alright, so other than Unlock, this is really the only other rather light game in my 11 through 20. And this one is The Mind. The Mind is a simple card game where you are simply trying to play cards from lowest to highest simultaneously with one or two or three other players. And if you ever play anything out of sequence, you lose life, and if you lose too many lives, the game ends. That is essentially what you're doing. There's also a throwing star that will let you all discard the lowest card from your hand before resuming. But other than that, this is a game that is purely a game of timing. It is a matter of, okay, the last person played a 13, my lowest card is a 35, so why don't I just play the 35 now? Okay. Oh, that was too quick. Someone else had a 31. Shoot, we lose a life. Okay, maybe I need to slow down. Maybe, okay, so... Okay, on the next one's, so 30, the 35. I've got a 61. I should wait for it. Wait. Oh, someone just played a 63. Shoot, we also lose a life. You know, and that's the trick of the game. It's, you can never quite perfectly make it match up with what other players are doing. Now, because this is a game that is relying on something that is fairly subjective, which is a sense of when it has been long enough to do something, based on numbers, nothing more than numbers. Okay, a 19 has been played and you have a 42. How long do you wait? How long is long enough? You do have to be careful that you don't do things that can make it a little too easy, which is like trying to count in your head at a certain rate. and synchronize that with other players. You just want to sort of feel how long enough has been, and there are ways to work around that, which you sort of have to just enforce at the table. So I could see this going very poorly with some groups. However, I also think that it's a tremendously interesting exercise to try to synchronize how long is too long and how short is too short, and make that all work together with other players, especially with larger numbers of players, because doing this with 4 players is incredibly more difficult, which is why you have to do fewer levels if you are doing 4 players than you do if you are doing 2 players or 3 players. But all that aside, I just find the core gameplay very compelling, and it's nice to have a game that I can play with literally anyone. There are some people that wouldn't like this. I can't think of a single person that I couldn't play this with as a matter of principle. Except unless a person is literally not able to talk. That's about it. Because you have to be able to say stop. Or has severe motor issues. Other than things that would also generally preclude being able to play any other kind of game, this is the game for literally anyone. And sometimes that's all I want to play. I just want to play that game and have a compelling experience of trying to synchronize my sense of timing with someone else's. So that is my number 13. Previously ranked at 11. This came very close last time to sneaking into my top 10. Again, it still could. Games in this range are a threat to be in my top 10. Its weight is a 1, like I said, game with anyone. And we'll play 2 to 4 players. That is 13, The Mind. Alright, shall we go to the other end of the complexity spectrum? This is The Gallerist, my number 12. It was previously ranked at 19, so it's gone up. Will it get into my top 10? It very well could. Its weight is a 10. Okay, there are other Lacerda games that I think are more complex, but that doesn't change the fact that this is a lot going on in this one. And it will play 1 to 4 players. The Gallerist is a game that has a theme, which I really appreciate. I like the idea of running an art gallery for the snobs of the world, the rich people and the celebrities, and the other such people that are going to be able to either promote you socially or at the very least be able to back you with a lot of money. And the fact of the matter is, all the people that are represented in the game by Little Meeples are either people that will give you influence, that will give you money, or a little of both. One nice thing about the Gallerist is, while there's a ton of rules for the game proper, that's to be expected in a Viticulture game. It's just sort of what they do. The solo mode barely adds any rules at all. So you can, if you know the game from playing it with other players, or at least one other player, and you want to play it solo, the amount of rules that you actually have to read to get you going with the solo version of the game is very, very light. Essentially, you just have to move 1 pawn around in a clockwise fashion and leave behind meeples for the solo player, and that's about it. I think this is an excellent example of how you can have a complex system married together with a theme that is well integrated into that system. And it is also a theme that makes sense for having an intricate system. I don't know exactly what it would be like to be running an art gallery for the cultural elites, but I can't imagine that such a task would be particularly simple. And so it does actually make sense that doing such a thing would be this very complicated, intricate affair that requires you to really manage, juggle a number of balls at once. even if there are clearly some elements that are abstracted down to a more basic framework, such as only having 3 or 4 pieces of art in your gallery at maximum, or the fact that you can just sort of increase the popularity of an artist by deciding to do some social media posting, and that just single-handedly does it. That's fine. But it's a good sense of, this is the world that I'm in. This is why it is difficult and tricky, and it meshes well with the theme. This is one of the best Viticulture games, and it's also the one that I feel I understand, perhaps more than any other, with one possible exception that I'm going to be talking about shortly. Well, not far up the list, we'll say. I think I wouldn't recommend this to everyone because, again, once you get to this weight class of game, there are just going to be certain people that are going to bounce off of it no matter how well executed it is, how thematic it is, and how pretty a production it is. It's a level of rules that you have to be prepared to tackle. If you are, it's an excellent game, and I think you will enjoy it immensely. But you have to at least not mind a high degree of complexity. And even then, you might have to push a little harder to get into this one than some other games that I have ranked at like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in terms of complexity. This one earns its 10 out of 10 quite squarely, and there's no quibbling in my mind that it should maybe only be a 9. Not really, no. Yeah, it's just a great game, and I think I'm going to be playing it forever. So that is my number 12, The Gallerist. My number 11, and I can't believe this slipped out of my top 10, is Viticulture. Viticulture has been in my top 10 for a long time. It just barely eked out. Although, just as a matter of point, this is also a game I am giving a 10 out of 10, whereas I was previously restricting that to games that were in my top 10. I'm making an exception for this one. I think this one deserves a 10 out of 10 as well. The Gallerist is maybe a shade away from earning a 10 out of 10 for me, but this one gets a 10. It's previously ranked 9. Its weight is about a 7, so it's a medium-heavy game, and we'll play 1 to 6 players fairly comfortably. Okay, so this is a game that I almost always play with the expansion. I have the original big box version of the Viticulture expansion called Tuscany, and Tuscany adds a new player board. It also adds these orange buildings, which are kind of interesting. It adds a small element of area control that are worth some points. It also adds like specific goal cards that you can go for. It adds all sorts of modular things, and it's got a bunch of things that I haven't even attempted. I don't know if you can quite get that version of Tuscany anymore, but there is the Tuscany Essential Edition. This is the Viticulture Essential Edition, which already grabbed some things from Tuscany. If you get Viticulture Essential Edition and you get Tuscany Essential Edition, between the two of them, you'll have almost everything you will possibly want to play with Viticulture. Maybe the game is so much better with cheese, but I haven't tried it yet. I honestly don't feel like I'm missing anything playing with that. Excellent competitive game. Worker placement in a way that is both tense and allows for a reasonable amount of freedom, that it scales well between the number of players, because as you add a certain number of players, there's going to be more spots available, and that can affect things. Plus, you're looking at bonuses that are only available if you get to the first spot. It is just such a good game of winemaking, and it would be nice if I actually drank some wine, but I really don't drink much at all. And it's really only outside of my top 10 by the skin of its teeth. Incidentally, something that might get it back into my top 10 is that I just tried the cooperative expansion with it that I just acquired, and that was really good. And that was a really good experience, and it felt quite different. And having that added level of variety and all the different modes that can be explored in in Viticulture World, which is what the cooperative expansion is called, might be enough to boost it into my top 10 again. But then I would have to take something that's in my top 10 currently out. Okay, so what I'm saying is go play Viticulture. If you haven't played Viticulture yet, give it a try. If you played Viticulture really early on and didn't get to try the stuff that was put into the Essential Edition, and especially the stuff like the larger player board and with the 4 seasons instead of the 2 that you play in the Tuscany version, either the original Tuscany or Tuscany Essential Edition, um, give it a try again with those elements, because it might be enough to boost the game. I remember being mildly positive on the game the first time I played it, but the first time I played it was, I think, just the first edition, and it didn't have um, it didn't have all the refinements and the extra stuff that was thrown into, again, Essential Edition, and then later that was in the Tuscany version, and also imported into Essential Edition. So, what can I say? If you like wine, you need a board game that will justify you having wine. If you don't like wine, you need a board game about winemaking so you can laugh at all of the what is it? Is Souse or Souse? Word for drunken fools. Uh, for all to justify taking monetary advantage of all those drunken fools out there that you can exploit by your excellent wine production. Give this a try. This is an excellent game. I think if you can get over the seeming randomness of the cards and realize that generating more cards is part of how to make the game work for you, um, if you get enough cards, there should ultimately not be you should be able to find a combination of cards that is ultimately going to work. If you are finding yourself at the mercy of the cards, I think what's happening is you are ultimately not taking enough cards. If you aren't going for enough cards, yes, you can get screwed over, but the solution is to just take more cards. And if you get these 2 cards that don't work with each other, if you get a third card, that will work with one of the 2. That's essentially how the game is designed to work. So I have nothing bad to say about this. This game is incredible. Play Viticulture. Be happier. Improve your quality of life. Pass it on to your children and to your grandchildren and to the generations yet to come. And they will thank you, and they will erect a statue in your honor for having taught them viticulture. I can guarantee that, because that is the only appropriate response to being given a game this good. And we're not even in my top 10. So that was my 11 through 20. These games are amazing. I've already said it, but I'm going to say it again. Almost any of these games I could see creeping into my top 10, and all of them are incredible classics that I would be overjoyed to play anytime. But there are 10 games I like more than that, and without a doubt, these 10 games are the greatest 10 games ever designed. And if you disagree with that, it's A, because you're wrong, and B, because maybe you've happened to have played a game that I will eventually realize is better than one of these or several of these games that I'm about to talk about in my top 10. But in my defense, it might simply be because I haven't played that game at all yet. So um, maybe one of my 11 through 20 could creep into my top 10, or two or three of them. But these games I've loved for years, almost all of them. There's been very little movement in my top 10, and I think that's a sign of we're just dealing with the cream of the crop now. Little heartbreaking that Viticulture slipped out, but it's still very close. So we'll see you on the next video.